At the center of the peaceful space stood a small statue, barely reaching the waist of a grown adult. An alien mother and her child approached it, their footsteps soft against the well-worn path. The child, wide-eyed and curious, stopped in front of the statue, his gaze lingering on its diminutive size. "Mother," he asked, "why is the statue so small? It's no bigger than I am." The mother smiled, a mix of warmth and reverence in her expression. She gently guided her child to sit beside her on a stone bench facing the statue. "This, my child, is a memorial for someone very special," she began, her voice soft but filled with a weight that the child could sense. "A long time ago, a being not much bigger than you came from the sky and changed our world." The child's eyes widened further. "Someone from the sky?" "Yes," she replied. "It happened many years before even your grandmother was born. A bright fireball appeared in the heavens one night, streaking across the sky, lighting it up as if it were day. It crashed into the land not far from here, leaving a great scar in the earth. No one knew what it was, a gift or a curse, but the fire that blazed from the impact was like none we had ever seen. It was so fierce that even our bravest warriors dared not approach." The child leaned forward, captivated. "What happened next?" "For a long time, our people stood at the edge of the burning field, watching the flames devour the land. Then, amid the roar of the fire, they heard a sound, something faint, almost lost in the chaos. It was a scream. Not the cry of an animal, but something that sounded alive." The mother paused, letting the tension build. The child held his breath, anticipation mounting. "It was then," she continued, "that a figure stepped forward. Not one of the warriors, as you might expect, but the youngest elder of the village. He was not as strong as the others, nor as experienced, but his heart was brave, and his spirit was curious. He alone dared to walk through the flames. While the others watched in disbelief, he disappeared into the inferno." The child blinked in awe, imagining the elder's silhouette against the blazing fire. "When he returned," the mother said, "he carried something in his arms, a small creature, its body blackened with soot, its fur singed, and barely clinging to life. The elder brought the creature to our healers, laying it down gently, as though it were the most precious thing he had ever held. At first, our people thought it must be some kind of pet, so small and fragile. We feared that if it died, its master would soon arrive to punish us." "But it wasn't a pet, was it?" the child asked, his voice hushed. "No," the mother replied, her gaze distant, as though seeing the past unfold before her. "It was a human. A being from another world, smaller than any of us, but full of life and intelligence. The healers worked tirelessly to save him, worried that his death would bring disaster to our village. Yet, despite his fragile appearance, the human proved to be strong in ways we did not expect. Slowly, day by day, he recovered." The child tilted his head, puzzled. "But why would anyone think he was just a pet?" The mother smiled faintly, brushing her hand over her child's hair. "Because we did not understand. We had never seen a creature like him before. He was so small, so different from us, that we couldn't imagine he was anything more. It was easier to believe that he belonged to someone greater. We thought his ship in the sky had been a vessel of his master, and that his survival was only a matter of time before his master would come for him. But no master ever came," the child guessed. "No," the mother confirmed. "The human remained with us. Days turned to weeks, and weeks into months, and though he healed, he never spoke. He would watch us as we worked, his eyes always moving, always learning, but his lips remained silent. Still, our people grew curious about him, even if they didn't yet understand his importance." The child, his eyes fixed on the small statue, felt the weight of the story settling around him like a warm cloak. "So, what happened? How did he help us?" The mother's eyes sparkled with memory. "That, my child, is the part that changed everything. But that is a story for a little later. For now, know that even the smallest among us can hold the greatest power, if we're willing to see beyond what we expect." The child nodded slowly, his curiosity now sharpened into a keen desire to hear more. The sun dipped lower, casting the statue in shadow. As the two sat together, the legend of the human only beginning to unfold. The quiet of the evening deepened as the child and mother sat before the statue, the sun now a sliver on the horizon. The child's mind buzzed with questions, eager to learn more about the small figure from the stars. "Mother, you said the human never spoke for months," the child began, his voice breaking the stillness. "How did he finally speak? What did he say?" The mother chuckled softly, recalling the astonishment of her ancestors. "Ah, yes! That was a moment that changed everything. You see, after the human had healed enough to move around, he began to watch our people more closely. He wasn't like a child who merely observed in wonder. No, this human, though small, was sharp, curious. He noticed the way we built our homes, tended our crops, spoke to one another. He was quiet, but his eyes missed nothing." The child furrowed his brow, trying to imagine this strange creature. "But if he could watch and listen, why didn't he speak sooner?" "The truth is," the mother said, "we didn't know what he understood. He was unlike anything we had encountered before, and we assumed he was no more than an animal, a creature with instincts but without true intelligence. The idea that he might learn our language, much less communicate, seemed impossible to us. So we spoke freely around him, never realizing how closely he listened." She paused, allowing the gravity of this misunderstanding to settle in the air. "Then one day," the mother continued, "something incredible happened. The human had been living among us for many months by then. The wise woman who had healed him often cared for him still, ensuring he remained healthy. They had formed a bond, though she still saw him as nothing more than a strange pet. She was sitting with him in her hut one afternoon, humming as she sorted herbs, when the human made a sound." The child leaned forward, captivated. "What kind of sound?" "At first, just a small noise. A murmur. The wise woman didn't pay it much mind, she thought perhaps it was just a mimicry, like the way some animals can imitate sounds. But then, as she continued her work, she heard it again. This time clearer. A word. It startled her so much that she dropped her herbs and ran out into the street, shouting that the pet had spoken. The village was in an uproar. They thought she had gone mad. How could a creature so small, so seemingly simple, speak our language?" The child's eyes widened in disbelief. "What did he say?" "The wise woman claimed the human had said thank you," the mother replied with a smile. "A simple phrase, but one that carried immense meaning. When the elders and warriors gathered to see for themselves, they demanded that the human repeat the words. And he did." The village must have been in shock, the child thought, trying to imagine the scene. This tiny being, once thought a pet, speaking as if he were one of them. "The elders didn't know what to make of it," the mother said. "Some thought it was a trick, that perhaps this creature had merely memorized a few words. But as days passed, the human began to speak more, slowly at first, haltingly, but with growing confidence. He learned our language, little by little, until he could communicate with us. That was when we began to realize that he was not just some odd creature from the sky. He was a person, like us, with thoughts and feelings, hopes and fears." The child sat in stunned silence, trying to process this. "So, he wasn't a pet after all?" "No," the mother agreed. "He was far more than that. Once we understood that he could communicate, the elders began to ask him questions: who he was, where he had come from, and why he had fallen from the sky. The human told them that his name was something we no longer remember, but he said that he was an engineer. It was a word that held no meaning for us then. He explained that he built things, machines, structures, tools. But when the elders asked him to help improve our village, to build new things for us, he said he couldn't." The child frowned, confused. "Why not? If he was an engineer, couldn't he help us?" The mother shook her head. "He told them he wasn't that kind of engineer. The things he knew how to build were beyond our understanding, too complex for our tools or knowledge. Still, the elders persisted, asking him to help us in any way he could. He began to study our ways more deeply, learning not just our language but how we lived, worked, and thought. He spent time with our craftsmen, our builders, our farmers. And though he couldn't help us build new machines, he did something far more valuable. What was that? The child asked, intrigued. The mother smiled, a glint of pride in her eyes. He taught us to see the world differently. He showed us how to look at problems in new ways, to think beyond the limits of our traditions. His knowledge wasn't just about building physical things, it was about teaching us to build better ideas, better ways of living. The child's gaze returned to the small statue, his understanding deepening. So that's why he was so important. Yes, the mother said softly. That's why we remember him. Not for his size or strength, but for the wisdom he gave us. A wisdom that continues to shape our world even today. The child sat back, thoughtful, as the shadows lengthened. The human story was far from over, and he couldn't wait to hear what came next. The child stared at the statue, absorbing the gravity of the story so far. But if he couldn't build things for us, what did he do that was so important? The child asked, still puzzled. The mother smiled, her eyes filled with a distant nostalgia. You see, the human's gift wasn't in the machines he could create. It was in the way he could see things, how he understood the world around him in ways we hadn't imagined. At first, our people were disappointed. They thought, what good is an engineer who can't build? But the human's wisdom wasn't something that could be measured by tools or inventions. It was in how he taught us to think. The child furrowed his brow, trying to understand. Think how? Well, the mother continued. The elders, at first, didn't know what to make of him. They had brought him to study our water systems, our tools for farming, our ways of building shelter. Each time, the human would look at what we had built and say, I'm not that kind of engineer. His knowledge was of things we couldn't yet comprehend, things far more advanced than anything we could imagine. But what he offered was far more valuable. The child, still curious, pressed further. What did he offer? The mother gestured to the village beyond the garden, its simple homes and flowing irrigation systems. He taught us to solve problems on our own. Rather than giving us the answers, he asked us questions. He challenged us to think differently, to look at problems from different angles. He would sit with the craftsmen and farmers and ask them to explain what they were trying to achieve. He'd listen patiently, then offer a new perspective, often a small change that would make a big difference. He didn't improve our tools, he improved the way we thought about using them. The child nodded, beginning to grasp the idea. So, he didn't give us new things. He gave us new ways to use what we already had. Exactly, the mother said, her voice soft with admiration. And that's what made him so remarkable. He didn't impose his own ways on us. Instead, he helped us refine our own. He showed us that innovation didn't always mean creating something entirely new. Sometimes it's about understanding what you have in a deeper way. She continued. The human taught us methods of problem solving that had never occurred to us. For example, when the harvest failed one year, our people panicked. We didn't know how to adjust to the sudden drought, and the elders were at a loss. But the human asked questions. Why do we plant the same crops every year? He asked. Why do we harvest the same way? It seemed like a simple question, but no one had ever thought to ask it before. We had always done things the same way, because that's how it had always been. And did we change after that? The child asked eagerly. Yes, we did, the mother said, pride in her voice. We realized we could plant crops that needed less water, or harvest at different times. These were changes that might seem obvious now, but back then, they were revolutionary. The human didn't bring us new tools or machines, he gave us the power to adapt, to think critically, and to be flexible in our approach to challenges. The child's face brightened as understanding dawned. So, he helped us change, not by giving us things, but by changing how we think? The mother nodded. That's exactly right. His wisdom wasn't in what he could build with his hands, but in how he could help us build with our minds. He made us realize that the greatest tool we had was our own ability to think, to question, and to improve ourselves. The child glanced at the statue again, seeing it now in a new light. He must have been very clever. He was, the mother agreed. But what made him truly special was his kindness. He never forced his ideas on us. He shared them freely, and he respected our ways, even as he showed us how to improve them. He understood that true change comes from within, not from someone imposing their will from the outside. And that's why his legacy lasted long after he was gone. The child sat back, deep in thought. I think I understand now. He didn't need to build things for us. He gave us something much more valuable. Yes, the mother said with a soft smile. He gave us the ability to shape our own future. The sun had almost set, casting a golden light on the statue. The child felt a new sense of reverence for the small figure, understanding now why the seemingly insignificant creature had become such a revered part of their history. As the last rays of sunlight faded, the mother stood and offered her hand. Come, my child. It's time to go. There's more to the story, but that can wait for another day. The child took her hand, looking back at the statue one last time. I can't wait to hear the rest. With that, they left the garden, the quiet wisdom of the human lingering in the air, a reminder that the greatest gifts are often the ones that can't be seen, but felt, and passed down through generations. As the child and the mother walked away from the memorial, the child turned to ask, what happened to the human after he taught us all those things? The mother's expression softened with a blend of sorrow and gratitude. The human lived among us for many years. Though small in stature, he became a giant in the hearts of our people. He taught us more than just how to think differently. He taught us about resilience, compassion, and the importance of nurturing not just our land but our minds and spirits as well. But eventually, as all beings do, his time came to an end. The child frowned, sensing the solemn shift in the story. He died? Yes, the mother replied, her voice gentle. The human grew old, even by the standards of his kind. We never fully understood how long his people lived, but we knew that his time with us was finite. Yet, even in his final days, he remained a teacher. His body grew frail, but his mind stayed sharp. He continued to share his wisdom, not in grand speeches, but in quiet conversations, in the advice he gave to the young and the old alike. He lived simply, just as he had when he first arrived, never asking for more than he needed. The child gazed up at the sky, imagining the human's small figure standing among their towering people. Did everyone come to respect him? The mother nodded. In the beginning, as you know, some of our people didn't understand him. They thought him weak because of his size. But over time, even the most skeptical elders came to see his true strength. They saw that his strength wasn't in his body, but in his mind and spirit. He showed us that real power doesn't come from dominance or might. It comes from the ability to adapt, to learn, and to teach others. He earned the respect of the entire village, and his influence spread far beyond our borders. The child's curiosity was piqued. How did he influence others? Through the changes he set in motion, the mother explained. The problem-solving methods he introduced transformed our way of life. We began to adapt to challenges more easily, to question old practices, and to find new solutions. Our farmers became more efficient. Our craftsmen innovated better tools. And most importantly, we began to teach our children differently, not just telling them what to do, but showing them how to think for themselves. The human's legacy wasn't a monument or a grand invention, it was the way he changed how we saw the world. The child, quiet for a moment, seemed to process this. So we still live by what he taught us? Yes, the mother said. Our people have thrived because of his teachings. We honor him not just with that statue, but by passing down the lessons he shared with us. Every time you learn something new, every time you solve a problem on your own, you're continuing his legacy. The child looked back at the small statue one last time. But he never built anything big. He didn't leave behind anything visible. The mother smiled. No, but the greatest things he left behind weren't things you could touch or see. They were the seeds of thought he planted in our minds, the way he showed us how to grow. The most important legacies are the ones that live on in the people they touch, not in monuments or machines. As the village came into view, the mother stopped and knelt beside the child, placing a gentle hand on their shoulder. Do you know why we built the statue so small? The child shook their head, still unsure. To remind us that even the smallest among us can have the biggest impact. The human's size didn't define him, and it doesn't define you either. What matters is the heart and mind you bring to the world. The human may have been small, but his ideas were vast. And because of him, we became greater than we ever imagined. The child stood straighter, the weight of the lesson settling in. So, his legacy is in all of us. The mother nodded, pride shining in her eyes. Yes. We carry him with us, in the way we live, the way we think, and the way we care for each other. That is his true legacy. Together, they walked back toward the village, the setting sun casting long shadows over the quiet fields. In the fading light, the small statue of the human stood tall in its own way, a humble reminder that greatness is not measured in physical size, but in the lasting impact one life can have on others. As they approached the village gates, the child turned to the mother and asked, "Will you tell me more about him tomorrow?" The mother smiled warmly. "Of course, my child. There's always more to learn, just as he taught us. And as long as we remember his lessons, he will always be with us." The child's eyes gleamed with a newfound understanding, and with that, they stepped into the future, a future shaped by the quiet wisdom of a human who had once fallen from the stars.